Right, guys, let's talk about HTML input form attributes. So in this video, we are going to describe or talk about the different form attribute of the HTML input element. So let's start with an attribute called form. Okay, so the form attribute is going to be used to specify the form an input element belongs to. So the value of this particular form attribute must be equal to the ID attribute of the form element it belongs to. So let's say, for example, here we have our form. Okay, we have a label and an input here and then the submit button. What if we create a label outside of the form element? Like this, we say label, and maybe we say for equal to last name, and we will say last name like this, comma. Let's close the label element and we will break line. All right, and then we are going to, maybe we're not going to break line like this. We will add an input here. So this particular input is also going to be of type text. So for this example, and the ID must be equal to the for of the label. So we will say ID equals last name. ID equals last name, and then we need to give the name here. That will be last name as well. And then that's here we're going to use the form attribute. So this form attribute is going to link our form to this form here. And it needs to be equal to the ID of the form. So we will say form equal to my form. Okay, so this needs to be equal to this. And this means that this particular input is linked to this form. So that's basically what you can use the form attribute for. So even though this input is outside of the form, but we can still link that by adding the form attribute here and making it be equal to the ID of the form. So that's it. So now let's talk about another attribute, which is going to be the form action attribute. So the form action attribute is going to help you specify the URL or the link of the file that will process the input when the form is submitted. So let's say, for example, okay, we will bring this particular input inside the form, say like this, and then we will add another form. No, we add another input. So we will say, let me break line here. So we'll say break line, another break line. And down here, I am going to add another submit button. So I will say submit button. And the value of this submit button, I will say submit as the admin. Okay. So this is the thing. So we need to write the attribute form action. And as I said, the form action attribute is going to specify the URL of the file that will process the input when the form is submitted. So we'll say form action is equal to admin page.php, for example. So if you click on the first submit button here, the file that will receive the submitted data will be the home.php, because that's what we have specified here, the action. But if you click the submit as the admin, here the file that will receive, that we actually receive the submitted data would be the admin page because of what we have specified here. So what we can say is that this particular form action value is going to override the action attribute, okay, this action attribute of the form here. So if you put this here, this is going to override this action whenever the user clicks on this particular submit button. And also the form action attribute works with input types, submit, and image, buttons and all of that. So that's another attribute that we can talk about. The next attribute that I want to talk to you about is going to be the form encode type, okay, which is going to be an attribute that will specify how your form data should be encoded when submitted. And this will only work for forms with the method post. Okay, so what we are going to do here, we will say that here instead we will remove form action. Okay, we will say form encode type, okay, equal to, we will say multi-part / form data. All right, and then here we can change submit as multi-part form data, like this. So since this form has two submit buttons, the first button is going to send the form data with the default encoding, okay, the default encoded with HTML. Meanwhile, the second button, which is the submit as multi-part form data, is going to send your form data encoded as multi-part form data. So that's basically what we want to say here. So if you want to change the encodage of your data, you can use that attribute form encode type like here, and then specify the encode that you want to use. So that's for this particular attribute. Another attribute that we can talk about is going to be the form method. So the form method here is going to be that we're going to use that here in the second button. We say form method is equal to post, and then here the value you can say submit using post. Okay, so the form attribute that we are using here, the form method attribute here, let me put that into the quotes, is going to define the kind of HTTP method for sending form data to the action URL. Okay, so this attribute is going to override the method attribute of the form. Okay, the form method by default, it's going to override it. And this particular form method attribute is going to work with submit buttons and image buttons and all of that. So the form data can be sent over as URL variables if they are using the method get, or as HTTP post transactions if we are using the method post. Okay, so when you use, for example, the method get, like this, if we say get here, get, this particular method is going to append the form data to the URL in name value pairs. So, and this particular get method is mostly useful for form submissions where a user wants to, let's say, bookmark the result. And also there is a limit to how much data you can place in a URL. So you cannot be sure that all your form data will be correctly transferred using the get. And it is also advised that you should never use the get method to pass sensitive information like password and bank details and all of that, because this sensitive information will be visible in the browser address bar when using the get method. Okay. On the other hand, if you use the post method here, this method is going to send the form data as an HTTP post transaction, and the submission, the form submission using this method, the post method, cannot be bookmarked. And then the post method is also one of the most is the most secure. If you have to compare with the get method, we can say that using the post method here is going to be more robust and secure than the get method. And also the post method does not have size limitation, and it does not include sensitive information in the address, in the browser's address bar. All right, so here in our example, we have two buttons. The first submit button is going to use the default method. So the first button is going to send the form data using the method get, because that's the default method. Meanwhile, the second button here, if the user clicks on that, the form data is going to be submitted to the server using the method post because of what we have specified here. So that's basically what this means. Yeah, so now we can also talk about another attribute, which is the form target. Let's say, for example, here we can add form target is equal to, we can say underscore blank, for example. All right, so the form target attribute is used to specify a name or a keyword that indicates where the display, where to display the response that is received after submitting the form. So, and so when you do the form target attribute like this here, so it will definitely override the target attribute, the default target attribute of the form element. Okay, and so that's it. So if you click on submit here, the default target will be applied. That means that the response is going to be displayed at the default page. Meanwhile, if you use the target underscore blank, the response to that action is going to be displayed on a different window or a different tab. Okay, so let's talk about another form attribute that is going to be the form no validate attribute. Okay, form no validate attribute. So you can see here, if I can come back to the form target, if I click on submit here, I remain on the same page. Meanwhile, if I click on submit using post, since this is the button that is, specifying the form target, it opens a new tab. Okay, that's basically what I wanted to show you. Now let's talk about the form no validate attribute. So form no validate equals. So this particular attribute is going to specify that an input should not be validated when submitted. Okay. And this particular attribute is going to override the no validate attribute of the form element. For example, if we have no validate somewhere here on our form element, this will override that. Okay, so let's say that here we say no validate, for example, form no validate. So you can say like this, and it's going to make sure that this particular submit button, this input element, is not going to be validated when submitted. And then we also have the no validate attribute. This is a form attribute. And if we say no validate, let me remove this here, and we directly say no validate here, this is going to mean that all the form data of our form should not be validated when submitted. Okay, whenever we click on submit or submit using post here, all the information of the form should not be validated because of this attribute, the no validate attribute. So this is a Boolean attribute. It's either true or false. If you say no validate here, that means that it's true. If you remove that, the no validate condition is false. So guys, that's what I wanted to tell you about some form attributes and what you can do with them and how you can play with them depending on the requirements of your of your project, of the website that you are building. I hope it was informative, and if you have any question, feel free to write your questions in the comment section, and let's have a chat and discuss. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos like this one. Let's meet in the next one.